My name is Lori Power. I'm a group benefit consultant, and every week I do SHifT because I love conversation. I love learning from other people. I like seeing what's out and about, and I grow through these conversations. I'm really pleased that Nicole had brought this to my attention. We were having just a random conversation around this time last year, and both of us were on the same page. And we said, you know what, why don't we use the platform of SHifT just to do in our small way, put this message out there, have that conversation, and start engaging other people. So I'm really pleased to have everybody be here today. This is our second go, and we will continue to have the conversation as it grows and evolves. Right off the bat, before I hand it over to Nicole and Aaron, I'm going to first start with a bit of a video. So I'm going to break protocol and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to watch this video.
I came through an airport yesterday and 27 people, I counted 27 people who did not look at my face up. They looked a hair down, even though I'd lost a lot of weight. And they didn't look at my eyes, they didn't see my smile. Living with obesity is stigmatizing, it's demoralizing at times. It's very hard to stand up and tell people what is going on inside you, that their judgment of you has broken you down.
I'd spent 40 years trying to lose weight, and I'd failed for 40 years of trying to lose weight. Just that actual feeling of failure made me want to eat, because it was a vicious circle. I had so many insecurities, and it just opens a whole can of worms of negative thoughts in your brain.
I was such a freaking failure. My obesity caused me shame and blame for years. I never wanted to admit that I had a double failure, that not only did I have obesity, but that I also had T2D. I was already judged for having one chronic disease that most people in the world think comes as a result of making poor personal choices. But to then admit that I have a second chronic disease that is more often than not caused by the first chronic disease is sometimes too much to bear.
And that morning, when I was standing in the mirror and I realized how much I hated myself, I thought, there is no way in how I can go to my doctor. There's no way. So I didn't go on that appointment.
If you put your swim togs on, it's 19 steps to the pool, and everybody is going to look at you and assume that it's your choice, that you chose to be like that. I wish people knew that when you go to weigh yourself, you have already beaten yourself up and stigmatized yourself so much. I go through this every single day. Every single day.
I wish people would know and understand more, and have an understanding and be able to see somebody else's point of view instead of being judgmental.
Well, there we go. And now we're off. Nicole, I know we're going to invite Aaron to share, but can you do a bit of an introduction, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lori. And I always love that I have to go after these very moving videos and collect myself. So nice to see so many familiar faces today. I really appreciate the support of all of you, and Lori for hosting us on this wonderful platform. I want to start off today by emphasizing that this conversation, although we've had it quite a few times, particularly me, I've stood on stage, virtual stage, probably half a dozen times discussing this in the last year or so. It's not getting any easier. And I want all of us to really recognize how important it is that we are here today to talk about this, because we are taking those steps to make sure that we can continue to talk about this. And recognize that we all probably have some of those very biases that were discussed in this video within ourselves. And that's okay. We just have to start to move through it. And I think by being here today, we are part of this very small population of folks that are aware of this and that are taking the steps that we need to take to try to reduce stigma around this very difficult, complex, nuanced, polarizing topic. So I listened to our last show, Lori, back in October. I listened to it again yesterday. I watched it, and I realized how much I've actually learned in those 3 months since we've had that first discussion. And this is an ever evolving process. We do not have all the answers. I do not have all the answers. We're not going to solve the world's problems today, but taking these steps bit by bit, learning more about this and understanding, and then spreading the word to other people, I think we can start to change things. So Vicky mentioned in that, she said a lot of things in that video, but one thing that she said is that people assume this is her choice, that she doesn't have the willpower. This is inherently what she's saying, the willpower to lose weight, to stick to a diet, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the norm out there. That is what people think, that if you move more, if you exercise, if you eat less, you can lose the weight. That is absolutely not the case. And scientists and doctors have continued to come up with evidence that that is not the case at all. So what we're going to talk about today, we have a few different guests, Erin Skillen and Layla Mandelson. Did I pronounce that right? So I'm not going to take up too much time because we do have two other folks that are going to speak today, but I also want to encourage you to please speak up and ask questions. I know we only have 27 minutes today, but put some stuff in the chat if you need. And then again, as Lori emphasized, we are going to continue this conversation because as much as I've learned in the last 3 months, there's going to be a whole new set of learning in the next 3 months. So I will begin now by handing it over to Erin, who is a dear, full disclosure, she's a dear friend of mine. Erin lives in Victoria. I'm going to get her to introduce herself. But she's here with a very specific purpose to talk about an experience that she's gone through that I am so thankful and grateful that she's willing to share with us. Over to you, Erin.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, I'm a doer of many things, writer, consultant, speaker. I do a bunch of stuff, video, but in this capacity, I'm here to talk today about my journey with choosing to take Ozempic, why I did it, and how bias ties into that entire process. So essentially, I had data. I went to my doctor with a whole bunch of data, and I said, this is what I'm doing. Nothing is moving, not a damn thing after 6 months of this workout, these eating, da 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 da. And it got to the point where I wasn't going out. I would schedule virtual meetings wherever possible to stay in this box and not have to be in this box of reality. I was avoiding social events. I didn't want people to see me who hadn't seen me since pre-COVID and would kind of go, wow, what the hell happened to her? Making judgments about me when I had tried so hard to move the scale and it just wasn't cooperating. So I finally ended up seeing some family I hadn't seen in a long time, extended family this summer. And I learned that my uncle is actually, who's healthy and active. He is diabetic now. My aunt, who is also healthy and active, is now pre-diabetic. My grandma had a quadruple bypass. She was as thin as you can imagine, and yet she still needed a quadruple bypass. So this side, the other side of the family, they live forever, but this side was starting to worry me. So I went to my doctor and I said, look, I'm scared if this is what I was 42 at the 43, 40, well, I was 40 something. If this is what this looks like, what does 50 something, 60 something, 70 something look like? I'm scared. And I hate that when I go hiking, I feel my knees hurt. I feel my ankles hurt. And I'm worried and I want to be social. I want to go out. I want to have a life. And I'm tired of beating myself up all the time. So we had a couple of really good conversations and she talked about the impact of perimenopause and how my body had hit a set point where it was holding on to everything and was refusing to let go. And so we came up with a short-term plan to use Ozempic to help me shift my weight and try to reset a new set point for my body. So for the last 6 months, I have been taking Ozempic. I went to 1 milligram maximum per week to offset side effects. And I also, so over the past 6 months, I have lost 40 pounds. I am now halfway through the tapering process, going off of it. The cost of it was $231 per month, which was paid for by my partner's health spending account. Just as people in the industry, I'm sure you'd find that interesting. But I just wanted to say that not only is being obese, I was obese at the time, not only is being obese hard and the judgment that comes with that, but the judgment of taking this medication is very nuanced. There's a lot of judgment that I cheated, I took the easy way out. It's all going to come back. There's a lot of bias connected to that as well. So it's not easy Carrying the weight, it's not easy losing the weight. There's bias throughout the entire process and everyone feels entitled to have an opinion. And I'll stop there in case anyone has questions.
I have some questions for you, Erin, if you're
Yeah.
open, and I want to thank you right off the bat for the bravery, because let's not, it is brave what you're doing and having a conversation with us and allowing the conversation to happen. And I can only imagine how much judgment you put on yourself on a day-to-day basis. From the recipient, because I mean, whether whoever we are, we judge ourselves. We look in the mirror each day, we get older, we do whatever, and the scale talks to us in really mean voices. Why, from your perspective, do you think that people feel that they have the authority to judge in the first place? What is it?
Yeah, I think it comes with that notion of choice that, as they spoke to in the video, that you're choosing. This is a lifestyle choice. I'm not working out. I'm eating garbage. I'm doing all the things. She must be, because those two things are associated. And a lack of understanding of the complexity of the human body and what truths people may be carrying. Yeah,
I'm astounded when I start to watch older programs, because we do love the 80s programs, and you know this as well as I do. You can look at those old programs and you can see, like, it just is infectious how much the body bias is drilled in as a comic relief.
Yeah, absolutely. And the stories you hear behind the scenes of what actors and actresses actually go through, and what they went through and the harm that it caused them on that journey, being critiqued and being the butt of the jokes. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to hand it back over to you, Nicole, but I did have those questions with regards to why we feel that it's entitled for us to tell somebody what they can and cannot put into their grocery cart.
Looks like actually Krista has a question. Thank you, Krista.
Not a question, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think a lot of what makes people, partially, as you said, there's this assumption that it's only a lifestyle choice. That's the only reason that people ever have more weight than they want to carry. But there's also just this general misconception that being overweight equals unhealthy and being thin equals healthy. Like, yes, sometimes that's the case, but I think everybody knows examples of skinny people who are wildly unhealthy and people who are maybe heavier than would be ideal, but they're exercising, they're eating right, and they're full of energy and they're sleeping well and their skin looks phenomenal. Like, it's not necessarily, correlated directly in that way, but we've been trained that it is. So when you see somebody carrying extra weight, there's all of that judgment on it too. Like, why are you choosing to be unhealthy? Like, when those two things go together.
And you're not necessarily unhealthy.
No.
Right. That could be the body you were born with. Like if I'm married to a 6'7" man, right? If he's going to be under 200 pounds, he's not going to look healthy at all, nor is he going to feel very healthy. But Patty had a good question here for you, Erin, on thinking that particular pharmaceutical, once you're on it, you always have to be on it. What was your doctor's perspective when you went and decided to have that conversation?
Yeah, her notion was that because I was, she was really looking at the notion of a set point, because the weight that I was carrying was was higher than usual for me. And I had previously done some damage to my metabolism when I was going through my divorce, and I just kind of stopped eating for a year. So, you know what? I'm not willing to, I already have to take thyroid medication so every day for the rest of my life. So I'm trying to reduce things that I need to carry for the rest of my life. So what I did was just really focus on ensuring that my lifestyle choices, that my exercise, that everything was in place. So I wasn't just relying on the medication, but also things it was telling me, like I would skip breakfast and not eat until like 2 PM, and the medication to be like, oh, we're going to make you nauseous because you haven't eaten anything. And so it was training me into some good habits at the same time. And yeah, maybe I'll find out it's, you can't just not be on it forever, but I honestly would love to prove that wrong first before I just accept it. And other people need the medication as well right now. So there's that too.
And And I think that's a good segue into talking about some of the other bias that people are experiencing when they are taking Ozempic. And one is that we know that this is for weight management, it's an off-label use. We know that in Canada right now. And there's been much discussion about how there are shortages of Ozempic because it is meant for folks with diabetes and they can't get to the medication. And the inherent prejudice in there is that people who have diabetes should take precedence over people who have obesity. In that, again, the folks who have obesity, they're there because of their choice, because of their laziness, because of their lack of willpower, which is, again, completely wrong. Mike, you've made a note. One of the notes you wrote in here is about talking about the science. And I think, yes, we should get to that part. There is a lot of science behind it, why people do live in bigger bodies. That has absolutely nothing to do with eating or not eating or exercising or not exercising. Absolutely nothing. It has to do with what goes on in your brain, which you can't control, how you store fat, how much you should be eating. These are things we cannot choose. We don't choose. I'm not an expert on this. We can get an expert and bring it in for perhaps the next show. But I also appreciate the other side of the polarity of this discussion is the health at every size folks who say, you know what, we're happy the way we are, leave us alone. If I'm 300 pounds or 400 pounds or whatever, leave me alone. If I'm healthy, leave me alone. And I appreciate that folks who are trying to make changes to their body by taking Ozempic or doing what have you, the health at every size people aren't very happy about that either. So the nuances of the layers are very deep. And again, we're just learning. And we don't know what we don't know. And we're starting to get to the point where I think we can amass some sort of knowledge and know that there is a lot going on out there that we just can't, we're trying to impart on everyone.
Well, and Jay has a question, so I'll let Jay ask his question, but I think it really, the point that we want to strike home today is it's your personal choice. Your body is your body. It's nobody else's, right? This is my body. Don't judge me on it, right? You don't live in my shoes. You don't drink my drink. You don't even know what's in my cup here today, right? You just don't. So let's start with ourselves first in clearing out our own bias. And that is more the message. If your body is your body, that's great. I should love you regardless, right? I don't fall in love with a gender. I don't fall in love with your age. I don't fall in love with any of those things. I fall in love with the person. So let's understand that we are the person. Jay, you had a question?
It wasn't so much a question. It was just a point about exactly what Nicole said with the conversation that's out there right now about diabetics might not be able to get Ozempic because of people being prescribed it for weight loss, weight control. I have multiple clients who are pre-diabetic on Ozempic. How important is it to prevent diabetes as well? And I'd like to see more support for that. So I talk about that whenever I get the chance to, because, nobody's talking about prevention of illnesses, or a few people. And to your point about heavy people saying, leave me alone, I'm happy, that's my dad. And he is quite healthy. He goes to the doctor and great cholesterol, great blood pressure, and not on any medications at 76. And he's probably about 280 right now, my height. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Jay. I'd like now to move the focus and talk to Leila, who is from Green Shield, one of our insurance providers. When I first started down this journey in 2020, my aim was to try to move the needle with the insurers. Not necessarily the general public, the employers and the employees, and to try to get the insurers to understand that this is a condition that needs to be treated just like any other condition. I have had some difficulty with some insurers who will not be named here, and some ease with other insurers, which is fantastic. And what I want Leila to talk about today, I'm not going to introduce you, Leila, you can do that, but the progress that is being made from your side so that we are starting to see the needle moving within the insurance companies, which I think will help move the needle in terms of bias with the employers, with employees, et cetera, et cetera. So
Agreed.
over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So for everyone who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, Layla Mandelson, I am the Director of Product Management and Delivery for the pharmacy team at Green Shield Canada. I am a pharmacist by training. I've had a good portion of my career practicing in clinical pharmacy as well as practicing in the benefit space, specifically managed care pharmacy with PBMs, both in the US and Canada. And again, thank you for having me here today. It's a tremendous conversation. It's an important conversation that needs to be had. And that's exactly where the pharmacy team at Green Shield was, early last year, we came together and we said, this is an epidemic. There is an obesity epidemic in Canada, globally. We have more than 1 in 4 Canadians that are, by medical definition, by diagnosis, meet the criteria for obesity. And we said we need to stop talking about obesity as a lifestyle choice and considering obesity benefits as a excluded benefit by default. And so we really started a journey of understanding where we had been and where we needed to get to and what progress has been made in terms of the science to understand the pathophysiology of obesity, what leads to it. We know that, as that has been shared already, it's not a choice. Yes, we can be blind to the fact that there are certain lifestyle decisions that we make that could contribute to it, but it is not just that. There's genetics that influence obesity, and there is our physical environment and socioeconomic factors that all come together to contribute to ultimately what results in obesity. When I always like to bring us back to the world we're living in today. The modern world is very much built around us in a way that conduces us to do less of what would be helpful and healthy for us. We're spending our days sitting. We are walking less. We're not active. And it takes an explicit and intentional decision to be active and then fit that in our busy days. And then it becomes lower priority. So I share all of that because I want to highlight that as part of the journey we undertook last year at Green Shield, there is a recognition that it is a multifactorial disease. It is complex and it is chronic. We know that it has been medically recognized as a chronic disease. And so at Green Shield, we decided to really take a step back and look at what our standard drug formularies included or excluded when it comes to managing obesity, and really revamp our drug review processes and drug listing decision process when it comes to obesity drugs, and more broadly to lifestyle drugs, because it's not just obesity. I believe infertility was mentioned earlier. Erectile dysfunction is another example. So last year we really focused on obesity, and we decided to start breaking apart what are those pieces that need to be in place to ensure that a patient that is diagnosed with obesity, very much like a patient that is diagnosed with diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol, what needs to be in place in a benefits plan for them to be able to access the treatment that's required. The other thing that I will mention is it's not just the recognition of it as a disease, but it's also, I think it's important to recognize that we're here today because the science behind the drug therapies that are entering the market today has made its way into the drug pipeline. We're seeing drugs that are developed based on that new science. We know that the drugs of yesterday are not the drugs of today. The drugs of yesterday had much lower efficacy, and their safety profile was not a very positive one. And so, in the past, we had a misunderstanding of the disease, and we didn't have the greatest tools in our toolbox to tackle that disease. Today, we're in a very different world. We're having an open, honest conversation about what it means to be diagnosed with obesity. What do we need to do to tackle it? We know it's not I took the medication and I'm done and then I come off of it. It's a lifelong journey. And we have tremendous tools in our toolbox to be able to manage the disease, drugs being just one of the many tools that are available to all of us. And so what that has led us to today is effective Gen 1 at Green Shield. Obesity drugs are standardly included in our drug formularies. So, you know, we are having these very honest conversations with plan sponsors, and we're giving them the tools that they need to be able to revamp their benefit plans. And so as plan sponsors, employers are coming on board and recognizing obesity as a disease and an important one for their employee population, we are ready to provide them with drug formularies that include the tools that they need from a drug therapy perspective to be able to manage that condition.
Nicole, is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was really helpful, Layla. Are you finding, obviously you're looking from the Green Shield perspective, so when you say Gen 1, in terms of opening it up for obesity specifically, and maybe this is a plan sponsor decision, but is this something that if, let's say, that plan sponsor currently has an unlimited drug max, is it just folded into that, or is it being segregated in any way?
No, so that's a great question. Thank you. So so what we did was we recognized that some plan sponsors that offered coverage for the drugs, when they did that, they often applied dollar limits, annual maximums or lifetime maximums specifically at that category. And that was very much part of the work that we did. It was a question of, should they be standardly included in a drug formulary? Yes. And then what kind of cost control measures, what kind of utilization limits do we need to put in place? Just like we do with any other drug for any other disease. That is the role, you know, for a PBM and an insurer. We need to make sure that drugs and benefits are available to employers in a responsible fashion and in a cost-effective fashion. And so the perspective that we took was one to say, let's remove, and I'm going to use the word arbitrary, but I'm mindful that when it looks arbitrary from one perspective, it may not be from another. But from a clinical perspective, arbitrary dollar maximums, we wanted to remove those away. And so to your point, when the drug is covered in the formularies that we have put together, it is covered as part of the standard plan design, the general overall maximum if one exists on the plan. And from a cost control measure, what we have implemented is the drugs are evaluated in the same mechanism as any other drug for cancer or diabetes. We look at the evidence, we look at the clinical program through which the drug came to market and was authorized. We look at what makes sense from a clinical perspective, clinical evidence, practice guidelines, and that is used to inform any controls that would apply to the drug. But again, we do it for the specific drug based on the evidence for that drug.
And that helps normalize the disease, which I think is the important part here. And what we're talking about again is how to reduce bias. And if we normalize, if obesity and defined as having excess adipose or fat that compromises other parts of your health, if that's how we're defining obesity, then we can start to normalize this condition for people so that when they do need to take that step, the very important step to say, I think I need to do something about this because it's affecting my health in other areas, then those barriers, we're starting to remove those barriers. And I think that is critically important in changing this bias that we are in, we all live.
I think that's a really good point, Nicole, most especially because that it's wonderful to put it onto a benefit program for those that are employed. Let's not forget that sometimes the social bias itself prevents people who are suffering from going and getting a job. They are just so beaten down that just leaving the household or their assumption of stupidity, you know, that fat and lazy, right? And so they go for the job and they don't get the job. And so I think we do need to normalize these things on a number of levels, starting again with ourselves and our own judgments on there, that it's wonderful to have it available on a benefit program for those that are entitled to a benefit program. But let's continue that conversation about how to remove that judgment, how to remove that bias.
Can I ask another question?
You
I don't want to monopolize. But I mean, this is Leila, you might have, or Dan, some comment on this. I'm just curious. So as you've mentioned, Leila, GreenShield's position, hopefully sort of the private payer market, you know, gets in line, as it were, on this sort of issue, because it has to be more broad-based. But government, I'm curious, and I know it's tough because it's a patchwork, every province, et cetera. I think we have BC, Alberta, and Ontario pretty well represented here today. But does anybody know if we're seeing any movement from public payers in terms of this issue?
My understanding is INES in Quebec is starting to look at the drugs to reevaluate coverage. So nothing covered yet publicly, to my knowledge, based on the research we've done, but that signal from Quebec tells us that public is starting to really recognize that we can no longer continue to just ignore obesity. We need to, you know, we need to talk about it. We need to address it. We need to manage it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and much like some other conditions, there's a heck of a good argument. Again, I'm no clinician, don't play one on TV, but argument about, I would think, the downstream public impacts on our healthcare system. You know, somebody was commenting about preventative earlier, Jay, and like, I would imagine this could be enormous in that regard.
Absolutely. We know that obesity contributes to many other chronic diseases, you know, not only diabetes, but it has been implicated in, you know, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and we know that all of those are leading causes of death and hospitalizations. So it definitely, there's no doubt that it has a downstream impact to employers, to the public healthcare system, and you know, very broadly. So.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming in today, most especially to Nicole for continuing the conversation, and a special thanks to you, Erin, for sharing your story. That it is so important to have your perspective and look at it from both sides, from many sides. And I hope we're going to continue this conversation. Nicole, what will we go into on our next session, do you think?
Well, tough call. There's so much to talk about. Just last week, I discovered this, and I shared it with Lori, and I'm not going to get the name right, but it's a Edmonton. It's something that is different from the BMI chart, which I was loving, and I can't remember the name. If anybody knows, pop it in the chat. I know it starts with Edmonton because that's pretty cool, but it's a different measure to indicate whether or not there are comorbidities associated with someone living in a bigger body. And that, I mean, we could have an entire conversation about that. And it's back to, Leila may have said this, or Erin, I can't remember. Just because you're in a bigger body doesn't mean you are unhealthy or you have a lower health. And just because you're in a smaller body doesn't mean you are healthy. And that, thank you, Edmonton Obesity Staging System. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but it's fantastic. And it's such a game changer, I believe, in how to approach people in terms of what clinical procedures or the next steps for those folks, so that we could, I'm sure we could have a conversation about that too. But I'd like to say we are open to what you'd like to discuss next, you folks who have come here for the second time in a row. So you all know how to get a hold of Lori. Most of you know how to get a hold of me. If you have topics that you'd like to discuss in this same vein, let us know.
Absolutely. And I hope that some of you, all of you, will come out for our workshop, because we can learn and grow and build our own strategies with the help of our peers in an authentic conversation. Thanks so much for always making this the best half hour of my week. And I hope to see everybody again soon. Thank you again.